Now let's move on to our panel, and I would like to introduce Samantha McClellan, the Economic Development Manager here at JEDI, who will be the moderator for panel number 1.
Great, thank you, Stan. So for our Painting the Picture panel, each of our panelists will give a presentation for 15 to 20 minutes, and then we're going to move into a Q&A session. So for the first panelist, I would like to introduce Brad Coady and welcome him to the main stage. Brad Coady is the Executive Director of Business Development and Strategic Planning with NB Power. He oversees the utility's integrated resource planning and a variety of corporate businesses initiatives. His areas of responsibility include rates modernization, corporate strategic planning, and environment services. Brad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. What a pleasure it is to be here today. I've got a few slides I wouldn't mind sharing with you if it's okay to kind of help me with my talk here this morning. Just bear with me. All right, so today we're talking about, I guess the theme of the conference is painting the picture. And what I would like to talk to you today is a little bit about how I see and our company sees the future for clean energy in New Brunswick. We've got a moonshot of a challenge on our hands, right? So how do we achieve net zero in Canada or in New Brunswick for that matter is a monumental task. And I'm really happy to have the audience here today because we can't do this at NB Power alone. We need all of you, and we need strong partnerships with all of you to help us get there. The whole idea, I guess, of the energy transition that's underway is that we need to be able to build our economies and develop the economies in a way that allows green energy to proliferate in the province so that as workers get displaced from traditional jobs, they find these new clean tech jobs and the economy actually accelerates through that whole transition. Don't want to underestimate just how big of a challenge this is. So, this is a great talk to have here today. Emissions reductions, that's what it's all about. That's what net zero is all about, is removing that carbon from the environment, right? I don't need to kind of explain what goes on there, but carbon dioxide molecules up in the sky, they vibrate at a certain way that actually traps in energy that the sun puts on Mother Earth here and prevents or retains that energy within the planet, which causes global warming. Global warming induces something called climate change. That's not good for humans or all of life on Earth, right? As the temperature begins to rise, we actually start to challenge how we can continue to survive on this planet. And we need to take actions now to be able to reverse the damage we've already done. At NB Power, we support net zero by 2050. In fact, we're working hard on the federal commitments to transition to net zero even faster than that. So a net zero electric grid by 2035. We have a single coal-fired electric generator. It's located at Belledune, New Brunswick. It's a big economic driver in the north in terms of all the direct employment at the station and all the contractors and supply services that we rely on to keep that system operational. But it's also incredibly important to the reliability of our electric grid. I'll get into this in a minute, but we have a carbon problem in New Brunswick and at NB Power, but it's because of the winter load on our system. And as we continue to do things, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, such as electrify our economy, that means moving carbon from one form of the economy to a different form, i.e. take a natural gas heater, for example, and make it an electric heater instead. And, those actually add demands to our system. And it's going to be challenging just to get there alone on electricity. And if we phase out of coal in 2030, which is the plan in New Brunswick, we're going to be challenged by a potential supply gap at that time frame, which will affect our reliability unless we can work together to plug that gap. Now, it's important to know where we have come from if you want to plot to where you're going, right? I'm a big believer in that. And who are we? Where have we been? And then how do we get to where we need to go? In front of you is a fancy bar chart that shows a gradual decline of NB Power's emissions over time. Now, what I want to pull out there is 2001. That was our peak year of emissions at NB Power. All right. Today, we are 80% below our peak. In 2005, the slightly different shade, lighter shade of green on the bar chart there, our emissions were 8.8 megatons per year. This is the chart I was trying to describe in my elegant words just a few minutes ago. Our peak emissions in 2001 were 9.9 megatons per year. 2005 in the lighter green, that's a bellwether year for all of our carbon initiatives that we're working towards, because the Paris commitments that were created in 2015 and reaffirmed just last year in Glasgow show that we need to have a 30% reduction, or now updated through Glasgow, a 40 to 45% reduction in our emissions from 2005 levels by 2030. And what I'd like to point out there is the last year in the slides, there's 2020, we were at 2.0 megatons at NB Power. 2 megatons down from 10 in 2001. What a transformation that we've had. And if you wanted to benchmark to 2005, we're already 77% below 2005 levels, and we did it 10 years ahead of what Paris would have otherwise asked us to have their emissions reductions. Said that slightly more, we're more than twice ahead of where we need to be, and we're more than 10 years ahead of where the rest of the world is committed to be. That's quite the story. Now, like I said, it's important to recognize where you've been if you want to understand where you're going. Now, another interesting thing to talk about here in New Brunswick is how we manage to green the supply mix over time. So our provincial partners, our owners, our shareholders, each of you that live in New Brunswick are an owner of NB Power through the province of New Brunswick, actually established a 40% renewable energy target for us in 2015 to achieve. In 2005, you see the pie chart on the top. About 50% of New Brunswick's energy mix, or electricity mix, I should be very specific here, was actually heavy carbon. 22% was renewable, and that was largely based out of our Mactaquac, Beechwood, Tobic, and Grand Falls hydro facilities, and Biscuit Falls as well. 28% would have been nuclear. Well, if I look forward to today, well, we more than achieved our 40% renewable target. We're more than 40% nuclear based, so non-emitting, no GHGs involved in the production of electricity at La Pro today. And we've got about 20% that's still heavy carbon based. And like I said, that's largely due to a winter problem. We've managed to have a lot of electric heat in New Brunswick, and our system actually peaks at more than twice the load of the summertime because of that heating load in the winter. Now, that's an important thing to consider as we consider further electrifying the economy. What happens to that winter peak, and how do we actually bring on-demand resources up to be able to stack together to serve that need and do it reliably, effectively, safely, and cost-effectively too, I might add. Well, you heard me say the keyword electrification a few times. Well, that's an exciting, disruption that's happening in our industry today. Electrification means the removal of carbon from one part of the economy and adding it in, or adding the load that would have otherwise been represented by in the electric industry. So the opportunity is not just transferring that carbon from the tailpipe, say of a car, to the smokestack of a power plant that feeds an EV. There's the opportunity, or there's the challenge in terms of how do we get electrification right. In our view, we see electrification boiling down into three distinct areas. There's many areas, but these are the three I'd like to focus in on today. Smart grid. What do I mean by that? I mean, we're going to actually fundamentally redo how we do the electric grid of today. It's a two-way grid, right? Today, we have large power plants located throughout the province. They generate electricity. They put it on large transmission wires to distribute that to different cities and substations around the province. And from there, we break it down and deliver it to people's homes and businesses. Well, I think the grid of the future is going to be much smarter than that. We're going to see a lot of distributed energy resources where a customer at the home will actually be injecting grid energy all the way back through. And you may be supplying your neighbors from your solar panels on days that you have a lot of electricity going on and they need some. Or you may be helping cities or neighborhoods around town or around the province take energy away in that direction. So it's going to be completely different. And if you think about how we built the grid over the last 100 years, again, it was always from point A to point B. Now we need to have something that's completely bidirectional. It's going to involve a lot of clean technology to be able to do that safely, effectively, reliably, and cost effectively. The other thing I'd like to point out is we talked to friends of ours that are in different jurisdictions in Canada. And I'll just say Ontario just for the sake of it, but it could be Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta. It doesn't really matter what you talk about. When you go into their homes, largely what you'll see is that they have a gas furnace, natural gas fired furnace, a natural gas fired water heater, and a natural gas fired dryer. And probably a natural gas fired stove too, I might add. Maybe a barbecue on the deck. All of those things in our world have already been largely electrified, right? So the New Brunswick context is about 2/3 of our customers rely on electricity for the primary form of space heating. And water heating is even higher than that. Not many people have a gas dryer in New Brunswick. Most of those dryers plug in. So we've already electrified lots of our economy. So as you hear this buzzword happening throughout the nation, you got to make sure you keep it in the New Brunswick context. The other thing I'd like to point out is transportation. So we're seeing a massive push these days, especially with the cost of gasoline these days rising to where it is, that EVs are becoming more and more prevalent. I remember the first day I saw an EV on the road and I kind of said, oh, look at that. There's an EV. Now there's one in my neighborhood. And I'm seeing them every day as I drive around Fredericton. There's more and more EVs popping up to the point now that you're no longer saying, well, wow, there's another EV. Like they're starting to become into the background. Isn't that interesting? I also like to say that New Brunswick's ahead of the curve in terms of EV electric charging, right? So that's a big concern for a lot of folks is to say, how do I get my EV to get me to where I need to go? Am I going to run out of battery juice before I'm there? Well, New Brunswick leads the nation again in terms of the distance between level 2 and level 3 charging. We lead in a good way, I might add. It's the shortest distance between charging stations in New Brunswick than any other province in Canada. In fact, our average distance between high capacity charging is about 65 kilometers, which is well past any range anxiety issues that any New Brunswickers should be able to feel. As we get further into transportation electrification, what we're going to see is capacity constraints around the existing charging network and the need to further expand that network. And again, I think there's a good opportunity to work with partners on how we deliver more charging infrastructure throughout the province. Well, that smart grid that I talked to you about, we're doing a really big project today in Shediac. We call it the Shediac Smart Energy Community Project, which is testing what that new smart grid of the future might look like. We've got a 1.63 megawatt community solar farm. We've got commercial net zero buildings, especially the pension center and some of the political offices up in Shediac and the prison center, sorry. We've also enlisted about 400 residential customers to participate in how we test what the rates of the future and the equipment of the future can work together to ensure that folks can maximize the value of participating in that smart grid, two-way energy grid that I talked about previously. So we're going to start to see further installs happening throughout the month of April, and batteries and solar panels and smart meters are going to be deployed throughout the community in people's homes. And we're also going to launch our research programs around the same time as the deployment of that technology to really find out how effective it is and how we can maximize and learn from that to extrapolate the learnings from Shediac to the rest of the province. Energy efficiency. I can't stress this enough, that if you want to talk about economic impact in the province, energy efficiency is the lowest hanging, highest bang for your buck projects that we can deliver. We call it the energy pyramid, right? So if I talk about how we can incent more renewables on the system, well, first thing, we got to have good behaviors. That's conservation of electricity, right? So that's where you start to say, okay, when you leave a room, turn off the light switch. If you go to bed, turn back your thermostats, or better yet, have smart thermostats that can do that for you. The next layer of the pyramid would be energy efficiency. All right. So that's where we start to talk about, well, you know what? Do you really want to have that carbon leakage happening in your home? What do I mean by that? Well, if you've got a drafty home or a drafty door or a drafty window, you're literally putting carbon out your window. Why do that? Let's tighten up the building envelope so we can keep more of that heat in the building that we're trying to keep heated, which will have beneficial impacts on the peak of our system, which will require less energy to actually serve the heating needs of that building and make it more comfortable for the inhabitants of it. And it leads me to the next step. The top of the pyramid is renewable energy. If we think about where we're going as a smart grid with rooftop solar and other things in people's homes, well, if we actually tighten up the size of those homes and make sure that we're not wasting energy as we serve that home, well, the systems that we need to actually be renewable actually start to shrink in size as well to achieve that net zero home in the future. Well, that's interesting. Well, why does that matter? Because it helps save you money. That's why. If we don't need to spend money on bigger systems, we can actually control what we're doing on the smaller system, and that ends up in a more efficient, more cost-effective delivery solution for all involved. Put up here some of our targets. These are huge amounts of energy and capacity that we're saving on the system, and the amount of energy that we're saving overall through the different programs that NB Power and its partners offer. Well, again, remembering the history and where we came from, I like to keep track of how this has been going for New Brunswickers. So to date, we saved New Brunswickers $250,000 through these programs. We've taken, it's starting to climb even further than this, but about 83,000 cars off the road. And we've invested into the economy, to grow the economy with economic development, about $143 million. Well, there you can see your ROI, folks. We invested 143 and we saved 225. That's the big bang for the buck that I was talking about earlier. Now in New Brunswick, pathways to net zero. Well, there's no silver bullet that's going to get us there. All I can say is that we need every tool in the toolbox to be able to achieve that goal. It's going to be the challenge of a lifetime to get there. We see continued operation of Mactaquac absolutely essential in terms of how we get there. And the reason why is not because of the production of clean energy from Mactaquac. It's more because it's the workhorse that balances the system. So as demand fluctuates in New Brunswick, Mactaquac is the system that actually balances out. Okay, demand is going up. I better generate more power. Oh, it's fallen off. I better stop generating more power. It's the one that's most flexible on our grid. Well, also you think about that on a variable supply perspective. So if you have a wind generator or a solar generator and the wind is not always constant, right? Sometimes it's gusting a little bit harder. Sometimes it's ramping down. Solar farm, maybe the cloud is moving over and putting your solar panels into the shade. Mactaquac is doing the exact same role on the supply side to keep the whole system in check. So that's a key piece of how we keep our electric grid on a pathway to net zero. I like to tell people that Mactaquac is kind of like the battery of the Maritimes. So very quickly reacts to disturbances and is able to be called into action or to stand down on a moment's notice. Well, we've also got other programs that we're working on in NB Power, whether it's small modular reactors. And I can't stress how big of an economic opportunity that will be as we build out the value chain and the supply chain to feed into SMRs. Smart grid, like I said, there's so much opportunity there in terms of clean technology, clean devices, clean consumer products, solar panels, batteries in the home, deployments of smart water heating, et cetera, et cetera. Renewable energy, we're going to need more of it on our grid. And I'm glad we've got some partners in that space on the panel as well. Definitely going to need more wind and solar on the grid to help get there as well. Energy efficiency, don't take your eyes off of that prize because there's so much opportunity to be able to save energy and reduce the megawatt needs of the province through that process. EVs, they're huge and growing. Let's just put it that way. There's nothing but a massive uptake in EVs that we're seeing happening right before our very eyes, especially since we started incenting in New Brunswick the purchase of those vehicles. The last thing I'd leave you with is stronger interconnections with our customers. So New Brunswick today is one of the most interconnected provinces in Canada, and we actually share 13 interconnections with the provinces and states that surround us. That's quite the feat. But like I told you earlier, that we've got a really strong winter peak. We maximize the capacity of those interfaces. So they become big bottlenecks with our neighbors that we have the ability to pull more energy in or push more energy out. And we run into the roadblocks that there's just not enough space on the highway to be able to move that electricity through. Well, the Atlantic Loop is one project that we're working with the Atlantic Canadian Utilities and Quebec and our federal counterparts to say, could we do something like a super highway to move even more clean power in and amongst the region? The project isn't just about moving clean electricity from Quebec into New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. In fact, New Brunswick Power plans to leverage that same infrastructure to move clean energy from our province to those provinces as needed as well. It's really interesting, but it's really expensive, and we can't get there without federal support. So I think I'll leave you with this one. Probably a little bit over time because of those technical issues. Sorry about that. Achieving net zero, it's going to involve a lot of education and engagement with partners, with industry, with smart people and customers to figure out how can we do this together. Definitely going to need technological solutions and technological advancements. We need to maintain affordability and protect the economy as we transition on. And I can't underscore how important partnerships are going to be to achieving net zero in New Brunswick. More importantly, we also need to have a managed transition. Told you earlier, we've got a strong track record of reducing carbon, and we're very motivated to get there in the right path. We need to make sure that we don't make decisions in the short term because of reactions to certain things or certain needs that actually cost us in the long term. And with that, I'll end it. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Brad. And next up, we have Austen. So Austen Hughes is the Vice President of the Project Finance with Natural Forces. Austen was born and raised in the UK, where he obtained a diploma in mechanical and production engineering and an honors degree in environmental management. Shortly after immigrating to Canada in 2003, he started working within Canada's wind industry, initially developing approximately 90 megawatts of community-sized wind projects in Ontario. He moved to Canada's East Coast in 2009 to concentrate his endeavors on the maritime renewable energy market, focusing on delivery of wind energy portfolio based around the community and First Nations partnerships in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI. Thank you, and the floor is yours, Austen.
Thank you, Sam. It's great to be here. Okay, so the presentation I'm looking to present today, it really looks at what natural forces have done in New Brunswick in both wind and solar. So I've got a few slides just to really speak to the organisation and, like I say, what we've done in the province to date. So Natural Forces is an IPP, an independent power producer. We're based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We have teams in New Brunswick, in New York, and also Ireland over the pond. We've been active for just over 20 years. Primarily or historically, we more focused on wind, but more recently we've gotten into solar, storage, and hydro projects as well. Our development and operational assets are in Canada, and we're looking to do a lot of development in Ireland and New York also. All of the projects that we've been working on, all the projects that I've been involved in, are partnership projects with First Nations, universities, and CEDCs. And as an organisation, we would develop, finance, construct, operate, and own the projects in which we have an equity interest in. So these four, you can call them pillars, if you like, I think really embody the successes that we've had as an organisation to date. I think the first two, honesty and commitment. When we look to partner with First Nations or other community groups, the partnerships are going to be lasting 25 to 30 years because that's the length of the power contract that we would look to avail from the utility. So if we're going to be in partnership for 25 or 30 years, the honesty and the commitment has got to be there, and it's got to be really strong. The flexibility, we've had a number of projects that have been quite challenging with COVID. Our turbine tower sections were manufactured in Wuhan, China, which I'm sure many of you will know the origin of COVID. So that also created some stresses and strains on the partnership and on the project. So being flexible is critical to the success. So as I mentioned, the organisation's been around for 20 years. We've been delivering projects on time and on budget. We've really focused on First Nation partnerships for the past 4 or 5 years. And we have over 300 megawatts of operational assets now for wind, solar, and hydro across Canada. And we have thousands of megawatts of assets in early, mid, and late stage development, looking to take advantage of the procurement opportunities that we see happening across the province. And we can see on the photographs there, the 2 photographs you can see with the 5 turbines. That would be a partnered project with Tobique First Nation, which I'll speak to in a bit more detail in a couple of slides. So our projects, of which we are equity partners with our equity partners, we have about 225 in Atlantic Canada. That number would include 7 community projects where we have over 1,200 Nova Scotian investors invested in those 7 projects. 5 projects we have with First Nations, which would include the Birch Hill wind energy project that's currently being built. And in Western Canada, we have 2 50-megawatt wind farms and 1 10-megawatt solar project that's just being commissioned, we would hope next month. Those 3 projects are partnered with 4 First Nation groups also. So in each of these, or in all of these projects, should I say, Natural Forces would take an equity ownership position along with our equity partner. So I have a couple of slides now that just really speak to what we have in the province of New Brunswick. So in no particular order, we have the Austen energy project. So that's a 5-turbine, 20-megawatt wind project that's currently operational. We have a 30-year power contract with the utility, being MB Power. This was awarded a PPA through the province's low-res programme, Stream 1, which was launched by ME Power a number of years ago. That looked to secure approximately 100 megawatts of new generation. The first 40 megawatts would be for First Nations. The second stream would be for community groups, which would include First Nations. And then the third stream of approximately 20 megawatts was also for community groups and First Nations, but it was targeting what they called embedded generation, so smaller projects connecting to the distribution system. So for the Austen project, we have 5 Enercon EP3 126 meter wind turbines. So that means from tip to tip, it's 126 meters. So in the space of 10 years, we've seen the turbines increase dramatically in size. I think our first turbine had a 78 meter rotor, whereas now we're looking at 126, 138 in some cases. So it's quite incredible how the technology's changed over the past decade. So this project in particular, it cost $45 million to build. Tobique First Nation would hold 51% of majority ownership by way of equity participation or contribution, and Natural Forces would hold a balance of 49% as an equity partner. And Natural Forces Services would have been the entity that would have developed the project, and Natural Forces Construction would be the entity that would build out the project, and then we would look to operate over the life of the PPA. So we're in Pegadroit Energy Project. So this is a single turbine. It's 3.8 megawatts, and it's also currently operational, a 25-year PPA with ME Power. So this was awarded under the Stream 3 for LORA. So it's a single project connecting to distribution. This particular project cost just over $9.5 million to build, and very similar to Tobique. Pabonneau would hold the majority interest, and Natural Forces would hold the balance. So thirdly, the Birchill Energy Project. So this is a little different. It's a lot larger than, well, I guess it's over twice the size of the Austen project. So it's approximately 45 megawatts in size. It's currently under construction. You can see the little image on the left there. We have the collector line and the turbines as the green dots. So we're just west of Lawnville and just north of Colton Cove Generating Station. We have a 30-year PPA. This time we have it executed with St. John Energy rather than ME Power. We're using 10 Enercon EP3 138s. So that again, the tip to tip, it's got even bigger at 138 meters. And we're also contemplating a battery system to help with the balancing for this project. This was approximately $100 million in total capex, and we would have Tobique First Nation holding 51%, and then the balance would be held by Natural Forces. So we hope to have this project commissioned by the end of this calendar year, so December of 22. So all things being equal, I'm very confident that we can make that happen. So I think I'm also presenting tomorrow morning with Chief Ross and Chief Terry from Tobique and Pabonneau. We're going to talk a lot more about our partnership structures, but I think this is something that it's extremely important from our perspective to build the relationships that are going to last a lifetime. And I think 3 pillars we identify would be understanding objectives, honesty, and respect. And again, just going back to the example of the length of the PPA, we need to make sure that the relationship is strong and it's going to last for the long term. And we achieve that by being honest from day one and being respectful from day one and understanding what each partner needs within the partnership. So it's something that is hugely important from me personally, from Natural Forces. And I think it's one of the reasons why we've been able to create such strong relationships. So that's what we have in New Brunswick from a partnership model. But we also have Natural Forces Solar. So these would be two distinct business streams. The Natural Forces Solar division it's a new business line for the organization, and it really focuses on delivering solar PV systems. The original concept that we came up with was to provide this full turnkey service solution. So we would look to help prepare funding applications for our clients. We would do all of the PV system design and optimization. We prepare all of the financial modeling for the client. Once we had all of our ducks lined up, if you like, we then go out to acquire all of the equipment for the project, and then we build, we commission, and we'd hand over the keys to the client. So again, Natural Forces wouldn't take an equity position as we have done on our large wind plays. 100% of the project would be owned by the client, and we would be simply providing a service to that client. So this is what we have developed to date with the Mi'kmaq nations in New Brunswick. We have 7 nations that have been working with for over 2 years now. And again, all of these projects will be governed by this turnkey concept where we would try and provide everything and we would just hand over the keys when we were done. So I won't go through each of the projects one by one, but we can see, and again, this is going back about 2 years. Most of the projects are between, I would say, 60 and 95% complete now, but we would have 17 systems in total. In aggregate, that would represent over 800 kilowatts of power. And all of these projects will be governed by MB Power's net metering system, which would be capped at 100 kilowatts. So we created quite a complex financial model to try and understand the payment terms and what the project would cost and what the project would avail by way of offsets and revenues. So that, like I say, those projects are coming to fruition now, and they should be finished in the coming months. So that was a whistle-stop tour of what we've been doing in New Brunswick, and we're looking forward to developing a lot more projects. So with that, I'll thank you for your time, and I'll hand you back over to Sam.
Great. Thank you so much, Austen. And last but not least, we have Kevin Gallant. So Kevin Gallant is an author, inventor, mentor, and professional engineer who's received his Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the University of New Brunswick, specializing in 3D generative design, and is a longtime proponent of entrepreneurship and innovation. In 2017, he received the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of New Brunswick Citizenship Award, and in 2015, he was the recipient of the Provincial MBCC Innovation Award. Kevin has also been a part of the Technical Entrepreneurship and Innovation Master's Program at the St. Mary's University's Sobey School of Business. Kevin has been busy developing First Nations strategic plans and designs for environmental projects that include clean energy strategy, shoreline restorations, solar power innovations, sustainable fishery, and management practices. Kevin, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Sam. It's great being part of this group with Austen. I want to lead the slide into with Austen's sites. This one here in the top left is in Aulac, or near Amherst, Nova Scotia. So Natural Forces have been really beneficial in giving us great partnerships, private equity investments into solar and wind in this province. And I want to talk about other programs that commercial industrial facilities in this province can help in clean energy innovative financing. So next, please. I don't know if you can, there we go. So I wanted to start off with my slides with showing this European, it's a France hydrogen power island project. It's solar hydrogen, and like Chief Terry Richardson said this morning, hydrogen is a future for smart grid, and there's a lot of smart grid projects happening in the world. And Scotland reached 100% clean energy 2 years ago, and they did it with a combination of mix of solar, wind, and micro hydro. And I believe we should be working with a lot of companies, including UK, and we're doing it now, including other countries, to help in innovative solutions in the province of New Brunswick. Next, please. so what is the future in New Brunswick? And NB Power, Brad surely showed that earlier. It is a mix. We have wind from natural forces and solar, hydro, in particular, small hydro with no dams, might run of the river flow. We have companies that are right next door in Quebec, ORPC, that make river and tidal generators. And NB Power mentioned about the green infrastructure for EVs. It's huge, and their heat pump strategies. And St. John Energy just signed an agreement with a company with heat pumps from Europe. And then you've got the almighty smart grid. So I broke up New Brunswick's big picture into divisions, 6 divisions, and natural forces are doing half of these divisions, if not more. They're doing battery with the smart grid and Birchill wind farm. So it's a huge mix. And NB Power's been doing a great job, and St. John Energy. And you'll hear this afternoon from Summerside Electric, that have been around since 1920, and they have lithium phosphate smart grid storage and their case study. But there's a lot of mixes out there, and we need programs to help support EV infrastructure, level 3 to home batteries. I believe there'll be a home battery in every home eventually, whether it's a Tesla 3, Mango out of New York, Bluetti. There's a huge influx of home battery solutions that are out there, but solar PV is definitely a big part of it. And natural forces have been doing a great job in our province, especially in the north. A lot of people don't believe what's happening, but there's solar farms everywhere in this province, from Amukto and the new one, NB Power in Shediac, and every place but Ile River Bar and Fort Folly, Pabineau Falls, Eel Ground. It's amazing. And First Nations are driving that clean energy mix with partnerships out there, private partnerships with natural forces and other companies that I'll get into. Next, please. So, what does it take? And, there's many funding types that we can tackle in this province. And there's provincial funding, there's federal funding, there's non-government sources. Those are the 3 categories you've got to look at. And do you have the team, the technical team to look at options for different green type funding out there? There's a lot of funding for startup. When I started my solar company, we had a COA and CBDCs, which are still around to help out in startups for anybody that's new to the game. But ultimately, you need the skills and training, and there's funding for that. There's innovation funding through MBIF. I'll get into that. And then there's grant funding through a lot of programs across Canada. So, we've got large capital infrastructure projects, and then we've got to plan for these projects. And right now, I'm helping North Shore and Mi'kmaq District Council in planning a 5-year strategy, hopefully with more private investments. And ultimately, we have to train the younger generation to understand what even clean energy is, let alone climate change. So there's a new study that came out. If you want to search, it's called the Census of Renewable Energy Cooperatives in Canada. And what it does, it gives you an idea of what, I'm not going to go through all the issues with this concentric, this circle, but the economic is key, keeping the money local, train local, create local jobs in the First Nation communities or any municipality. The technical side, we don't want to tax NB Power and the grid, and, keeping the transmission lines short and decentralized, smart grids in each community. I don't know. There's a lot of innovation that's not even out there yet, and it's going to take a lot of technical skills. And for those that don't know, there's 6,000 engineers and geoscientists in this province, and probably the same amount of PTechs. So we've got to work together both with the local engineering firms and contracting firms to help with these technical solutions and to fight environmental issues, and to advance our clean energy transition. But it is a social issue too. We've got to promote the awareness of what climate change literacy really is. Yes, it's energy too, but it's also living shorelines, protecting the coastlines, recycling programs. But my core expertise in this presentation is to talk about clean energy. Next, please. So there's a lot of funds out there. I've actually identified 18 funds for a new clean energy, for cleaner energy communities strategic plan. And NRCan's got to be the top. They have so many programs for EV infrastructure, for Indigenous communities, for building energy efficient projects, to building to support deployment of activities and communities. So they're by far number one, and they will help out in commercial and institutional building sector. And we're looking at heat pump strategies as the number one in New Brunswick. Over 2/3 of the homes and buildings are baseboard heating. We need to convert those, and there's a lot of strategies out there to do that. Next, please. Another one is Climate Action and Awareness Fund. It's again another fund to invest up to $206 million over the next 5 years to support Canada-made projects. And they are made for technology. So only half the amount of innovation has actually been enabled at a community level. So hopefully we can work with more CCNB and MBCCs and the universities in grassroots community solar and wind and hydro projects. And we're talking to University of Moncton right now with solar. There's a lot of innovation in local universities, so we need to tap those resources. Next, please. So this is another one called the Green Infrastructures Program, and it's to accelerate the deployment of market-ready or entry of next-generation clean energy technology. And that's commercializing the scale of demonstration deployments, community capacity building, target research and development. We need to target more municipalities in this province, and a lot of companies are. One of the ones I want to mention is TrueSun. You know, they're in a lot of rural communities in the Northeast right now, and they're integrating solar capacity in rural communities along with natural resources in First Nation communities. So we need to take advantage of these programs that are out there from Infrastructure Canada. Next, please. Another one is the Canada Community Building Fund, the CCBF. It's a permanent source of funding, providing up front twice a year to provinces and territories. And they deliver over $2 billion a year to 3,600 communities across the country. And again, it's another infrastructure funding, but other than NRCan, this is probably another big one that will help out with communities, and municipalities need to work together in this province to help as a region and maybe partner with First Nations on projects. First Nations are taking the lead. What we heard this morning from ICE, and ICE is really taking a lead with a lot of the programs and bringing those to our province. So we hope to continue that relationship and build capacity in New Brunswick. Next, please. So this is a newer one for me. A fellow engineer that I know is building social housing through the Federal Federation of Canadian Municipalities, another big one. But they're offering grants, mentioned about grants for environmental projects through the Green Municipal Fund, through innovative technical and viable environmental sustainable solutions. So they will help municipalities at competitive rates to apply for financing for green solutions for municipalities. So we really need to work with them. They're already into social housing. So, you know, why not integrated ICF footings or efficiency standards that are that will provide better housing and better energy efficient housing in this province. Next, please. So I'm still not done yet. A couple more funds. This is our local, of course, OCOA. They've been around for years. They helped my solar company years ago in adopting new solar devices. They've been recently proactive with St. John Energy, providing help with bringing a Norway heat pump into St. John Energy. And they've been a community supporter for a long time, and they're our Atlantic connection to the federal government, and they have a Canadian community revitalization fund that's can help in community infrastructure. Again, another government agency that can help in environmental and green infrastructure in your community. Next. So now we're getting close to the skills side. No matter what fund you have, I've told my teams we need a skills and train team. And yes, a lot of companies can train on the job, but ultimately we need help and support in the green economy and infrastructure, blue economy. And for example, we're now a foundation member of the Green Economy New Brunswick, which is really helping us with greenhouse gas reduction targets for 3 First Nation buildings, administration buildings in Eelground. But all people need to be skilled in understanding how to do energy audits or net zero or LEED buildings. And hopefully we'll get more programs to support our skills and partnership funds. And there's $50 million a year available to do that through Government of Canada. Next, please. So now we're getting more local. NBIF is one of my favorite organizations in the province. They supported over $500 million in projects over the last 10 years in innovation in this province. And they recently have a new climate impact research fund. And so if you have a new innovation or a new heat pump strategy or a new micro hydro or a new smart grid storage, they will work with high qualified professionals and help engage research or master students at both UNB, UDM, Mount A, or any even non-academic partners. Just so you know, there's over 40 green groups in this province that want to be green, and the EOS Eco Energy out of Sackville are example of Renewable New Brunswick. They're helping to maintain and promote awareness. And so there's a lot of New Brunswick focused groups too, like NBIF and many others that can help you in your mission for green and clean energy. Next, please. And I can't express enough with Brad's. Lores is part of the local owned renewable energy projects. Lores 1, they've helped out set aside procurement for Aboriginal businesses and local entities that want to get into renewable energy through distribution generation. And NB Power and the electricity grid is the big green target. To get to net zero, we need to support NB Power and their electrification of the grid. And efficiency is number one, but ultimately we have to help in adding more wind and solar and small hydro, and hopefully can work as a team and with NB Power to get there. And next, please. And as I'm not going to talk about this, but I want to mention how to Beek. This is my favorite wind case study. Austen did mention the details of it, but we're getting a lot of investment from outside of Brunswick. Don't be scared to bring natural forces. A new company working with is Mitrix. They have a brand new solar facet product that we're looking at, solar roof tiles. There's a lot of innovation, and a lot of these companies will come in, install it. We gain some percentage of that investment. It's happening in Nova Scotia, PEI right now with Polaron, another company. They're filling roofs, my cousins, my uncles, and at 0% interest for their loan. So there's a lot of different strategies out there. And, and NB Power supported this wind farm. Tibik, because of this, are supporting their own local housing. There's a lot of housing crisis actually all over the province, but these wind projects are really helping to provide a long-term solution for First Nations and rural communities in this province. Next, please. So there's a lot of barriers. This is my last, this is from the census. Internally, there's economic, who's going to pay for it? How are you going to operate it and maintain it? But there's so many external barriers in this province of New Brunswick. And this is from a regional energy co-op study that was out in February. But you got to deal with economic, technical, political, regulatory, social issues. If you get a chance, download the CCSC census renewable, and it really covers these in detail. So if you're thinking about doing something in your community, you might want to review this report. It came out, there's a few clean energy reports that came out, but this one's, because really we're now looking at renewable energy as communities and municipalities. And I think we're on their way with these partnerships, especially the private partnerships. And my final slide next, to wrap it up, I think, one more. We'll just skip this one to net zero. I only have a few minutes left. Thanks. But we really need, we had enough studies. It's time to build construction projects on the ground with real investments. And we have the team in Atlantic Canada to do it. Like True Sun here, they've built solar canopies out of Beresford, New Brunswick, and they're setting up in a lot of rural communities like Nigadoo, Petit Rocher, and a lot of installations, along with Natural Forces and now another new company. We need to attract these private investors and open up and find real ways to bring these private investments. Private investments will help out 4 to 5 times better than provincial or federal programs. And so bringing this clean tech will become a source of revenue for both First Nations and municipalities in this province. And I hope to grow this and grow as a team. Thank you very much for the presentation. I know.
Great. Thank you to all 3 of our panelists for sharing your expertise with us. And now I would like to open the Q&A to the audience, and we can address some questions that may have not been talked about during the presentations. One question that did come up was somebody was interested in what avenues are being used for power storage other than batteries. Maybe this is an NB Power question.
Yeah, I can jump in there for sure. Like I said, we've got our hydroelectric resources at Mactaquac. That's the largest battery in New Brunswick right now. We've got limited ability to store for much more than hours or days, but you can actually build up a little bit of water behind that dam and release it as New Brunswickers need the electricity out the other side. The other project that we're also investigating is a project with Malta Clean Energy. I'm not sure if folks are aware of that, but we were approached by a pretty interesting company where they would like to take heat exchangers to actually take electricity, produce heat, store it in molten salt, and then you can store a large amount of energy in that salt and then reverse the process to pull energy back out and make more electricity as New Brunswickers need it. What's really cool about that project is they're pitching a 100 megawatt project with a 10-hour duration. So, on a footprint scale, it's really small to get that amount of electricity stored in one place. It doesn't involve a lot of mining of minerals, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's kind of interesting that it's starting to hit that medium to long-term duration in terms of what kind of energy it can produce. We're not putting any skin in the game, if you will, in that project, right? So this is a private company, again, with the partnerships saying, hey, we've got a great idea. We want to take something off the shelf and we want to deploy it in your network because you've shown a track record of innovation And all, I guess the deal, without revealing anything too confidential on that, the deal is if they bring benefits, we'll happily share the benefits with the partner, right? So that's what I'd like to leave folks with, is that, you know, you can take an innovative idea like the multi-clean energy and actually show how we can deliver more storage. Of course, we have lots of conversations happening with other storage, lithium ion type products, et cetera, et cetera. That is very interesting. I do see it as a part of the future, if you will, on the grid. MacTaquac has been our workhorse in terms of being able to balance the grid. But I can see the point as renewables continue to creep up, as they should, and as we support them creeping up on the grid, we're going to need more and more of that type of attribute on the grid to keep everything safe, reliable, and secure. I'll stop there and see if maybe Austen, you can pitch in with your Burchill maybe.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo your comments, Brad. I think lithium ion certainly seems to be the way of the future. We're looking at a 10 megawatt hour or 10 megawatt hour battery, I think, in for our Burchill project. I think as more renewables come online, I think the necessity to include battery storage options is going to be attractive to the utility. It's going to be attractive to the owner, to the generator. And I think, you know, you see these smaller systems, the residential rooftop solars, and I think, you know, the guys that are utilizing those systems, they really have the utility as their battery, because when they're not consuming, or when they are consuming, they're taken from the solar system and perhaps NSP or MBR, and when they're not consuming, they can feed that back onto the utility, so on a very small scale. But I think in our mind, I think that the batteries are going to be mainstream going forward.
Okay, great. Kevin, did you have something you wanted to add as well?
I agree. Batteries are there's many types of storage out there. They're all going to be a mix, but I think the lithium is going to be number one. Now that they recycle lithium in Ontario, the company called Recycle, that was a game changer last year. 98% recycle. That was a big issue that I had with deciding lithium storage, and looking what Summerside do, it can work. And now these power islands in Barbados that are using hydrogen, it works. They have this French company of 16 sites with hydrogen solar combinations, and geothermal is going to be part of it too. But I'm looking at the short for future right now for the province, and trying to look at what smart grid storage. And I think you've got to keep it simple, and the lithium phosphate seems to be the simpler solution right now. It's not that SMRs and hydrogen aren't part of the mix, but what you can do today, and you can buy it off the shelf, and and integrate it into our systems.
Great. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. We did have a question that came in from the audience, and what do you think are the top barriers for adopting the latest building codes in New Brunswick? As we know, PEI and many other provinces have put forward their goal for net zero.
I can jump in there first, and if anybody else wants to add on, it's great. It's a complicated question, right? So I'm not government. The government may own us, and all the people in New Brunswick may own us, but I'm not speaking on behalf of government here. Just to be clear, governments have the ability in Canada to adopt what building code they want to force, in their province or jurisdiction, right? So the government of New Brunswick could adopt whatever building code it sees fit. Now, that's a wonderful concept to say, why don't we just force New Brunswick to start doing net zero homes going forward? The flip side to that is, like Kevin hit the nail on the head, we already have a housing challenge in New Brunswick, right? And as you force higher standards on the folks, those homes become more costly, therefore more unattainable for a large base of our population. So it's important to keep everything in mind to say, look, if your only objective is net zero, yeah, no question, let's do a net zero building code right now, and no other home in New Brunswick will be built unless it's net zero compliant. But if you need to think about it more holistically and see it from all angles to say, well, what's the unintended consequence of that policy, for example? Am I making housing more expensive, therefore more unreachable for a large portion of New Brunswickers? Well, then that's another concept you need to keep in mind. So look, we've got the science. We know how to build homes better. NB Power has programs, and we work with federal and provincial partners to deliver programming to be able to reach more homes in New Brunswick to make them more energy efficient. And this is something that I think that we need to be leaders in, but we need to make sure that we don't hurt parts of our society that we don't intend to hurt through this type of policy. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. Would anybody else like to add anything to that?
I wanted to add one more thing, is that I know with the 6,000 engineers and geoscientists of the province and technologists, I find there's a huge skills gap right now in understanding what net zero really is. A lot of people really don't know what a LEED and net zero building really is, and I find there's a huge skills gap, and even what clean energy is in this province, in the profession. And that's changing. We're doing a lot more PD, and it's coming fast. And MB Power is helping on that, and a lot of different groups. But it's coming, but not fast enough to achieve net zero 2050. I don't know if we're going to get there, but hopefully we do with more skills training.
Great. Thank you so much. Another question has come in about subsidies. So are there subsidies provided to developers of clean energy in New Brunswick? And will this cost eventually be passed on to the electricity users?
So if I can jump in there. So I think maybe looking at New Brunswick, the projects that we've undertaken, maybe with Austen as an example, which is the 20 megawatt wind farm with Tobique First Nation, that was a competitive procurement. So I believe, Brad might be able to correct me, but I believe there are about 19 submissions into that first stream, of which 2 proponents were awarded PPAs, one of which was Natural Forces and Tobique. So it's a competitive procurement, so the lowest price essentially wins. So typically when you have a competitive procurement, there's no subsidy baked into the PPA pricing. I know in Nova Scotia, there's a current procurement program that's going to be kind of closing out in May of this year. And they've actually set a maximum price of $58 a megawatt hour. And the reason they've set that is because that's essentially the marginal rate for Nova Scotia Power. So the province doesn't want this current procurement to create expensive power. So there's no incentive baked into the PPA pricing. So there really aren't any other. There are certain grants that proponents can look to avail, but in terms of subsidies, I know. Certainly in Nova Scotia, wind is the cheapest new source of generation, period. So we don't, back in the day, we would have maybe like 1 cent per kilowatt hour subsidies added to the PPA price. In Ontario, they had an additional subsidy if you were partnered with a First Nation, which to us seemed just incredible because, our partnership projects with the First Nations can compete kind of toe to toe with other developers. We didn't need that incentive. But I think because wind has become so cheap now, the need for incentives and the need for the government to provide incentives, it really isn't necessary.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. I agree with Austen. The wind built in New Brunswick today is the lowest cost wind that we could have had on the grid at the time it was built. So, that's a great accomplishment, if you will. I'll also say one of the things that I sometimes highlight in my presentation, I didn't hit it hard today, but we've got the 4th lowest rates for a provincial utility in Canada, in New Brunswick, right? So everything Austen just said is absolutely accurate. Wind is the cheapest form of energy you can put on your grid right now. And, we're very supportive of having more wind on the grid, but when you overlay that with where we are and the 4th lowest rates in Canada, then you end up with sometimes an economic barrier, especially if you're trying to get to smaller community-based type of projects. So there are subsidies that Kevin highlighted, like there are a number of different programs. And Kevin, if you want to jump on this about that I'm interested in helping partner with communities and with First Nation groups and Aboriginal and Indigenous groups to figure out how do we work together to work with developers like Austen and his company to access those fundings to say, okay, let's get cleaner, let's have more economic development, let's have more renewable energy, but let's not raise electrical rates in the province while we go at this together. I think there's a big win-win-win-win, if you will, through all of that together if we can access those subsidies.
I think you hit on it, Brad, with why cleaner energy for cleaner communities for North Shore and Mi'kmaq District Council. We're looking at setting up New Brunswick in 3 regions because not one municipality can do it. So Eel River Bar and Papineau Falls, Listagush, that whole northern region can work together on strategies, with Beldoon, because, Beldoon's a big file for MB Power. And so how do we come work together Or how do we work together on a heat pump strategy? Not only on First Nations, but the municipalities in that area. I just got to tell you a story. I took a drive up to Packetville one time, and I wanted to really see the rural landscape. And every second home has a heat pump now. Okay, and so what is the next? What's going to be next? Is it the smart battery in the home? Is it an off-grid heat pump? Because now there's 48-volt DC heat pumps out now, and then the stash heat pumps that NBIF support out of Fredericton that have built-in storage. So, and NB Power has been a big supporter of, heat pump strategy efficiencies. And so, because I look at rural community and, we've got to look at solutions, but it's going to take a regional effort, not just Packetville, not just Bathurst, but working together with multiple municipalities to make it happen.
Yeah, that's some great points, Kevin. And we're nearing the end, but I have one last question that's come through. So I know you've discussed working with different Indigenous communities. I'm just wondering if there have been any barriers that have become evident while pursuing green energy initiatives with Indigenous communities.
Say barriers. I wouldn't necessarily say barriers. I think all of our First Nation partners, we've have a great long-standing relationship. I think it's sometimes quite the challenge to start the relationship. I know when we were working with Tobique, and I think the same for Pavane, we were working with them for quite a long time before certainly low res was even presented. And I think from our side, we took quite a few years just to build the relationship without really speaking to the specifics of the project. And I think, in doing that, we created a really strong relationship. And then when the opportunities presented themselves, such as the low risk program, we were able to, jointly bid. We were awarded the contracts. And I think, during, and I mentioned it before with the turbine tower sections being manufactured in Wuhan, China, that created a significant issue for building the project. The project was late by about 10 months. I think maybe even 11 months. But I think because of the strong relationship that we had from many years before we were, faced with these challenges, we were able to work together as partners and stay together as partners. And again, a 30-year relationship takes time to build. So I think just investing in your partners and investing in the partnership over the long term would help mitigate, challenges that you may face looking forward. And again, the delays that we faced, they were quite trying, they were quite painful, and we were paying operating expenses out of CapEx because we didn't have the revenue to support the operational expenses. So, it was kind of, if the partnership wasn't as strong as what it was, it may have gone a very different way. But I think because we had that strength in the partnership, it enabled us to get through the tough times. So I think that's really important. I'm not sure if that's answered the question, but I think that's me.
Yeah,
great.
I'll add on to that real quick. Is I see it quite the opposite. There's the Indigenous communities in New Brunswick had the secret sauce to getting projects done. All right, so like let's recognize what happened through the low res procurement. The two Aboriginal business projects are on grid and producing. Thanks, Austen, to your support on that as well. We've got community-based projects that seem to struggle, but Indigenous folk in this province can get it done. And I look forward to deepening partnerships as we continue to path the reconciliation around that.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. One last question actually came up as you were speaking. So a lot of homeowners with net zero ready homes do not understand the benefits of going to net zero. So how do we improve public education?
That was on the last slide. I had education and engagement was one of my first leading bullets. Like there's no doubt that we as a company can do better to reach out to customers. And that's something we ask ourselves every day is how do we connect better with customers? How do we get more vocal? How do we participate more in sessions like that you were nice enough to put out there today to help customers connect the dots around, hey, I've got this opportunity. And, back to the building code question, just real quick. A lot of times customers make choices, for I'd like the hardwood floors and the granite countertops, right? I don't want to invest in that higher insulation in the attic or in that solar panel on the roof. So we need to get better to connect customers to see where's the long-term value going to come from. and those investments will pay out, right? So if you can figure out ways to stretch the dollar to be able to reach it, or better yet, incent the customers through our programming so that they make the right decisions to be able to build the better homes, afford the better homes, and then to get to a cleaner outcome as a result. That's the key. It's not easy. And like I said, I look forward to input and thoughts from others around how we can do a better job in that. And we're definitely listening.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Brad. So we've come to the end of our session. And if you have a question, I encourage you to connect with the speakers in the People tab on the main event if you'd like to speak with them. And now I'd like to pass it back to Stan.